All right, my English teacher friends. So in this writing workshop video, we're going to tackle the role of artificial intelligence in education. So I'm pretty active in the Facebook groups and on Instagram and LinkedIn. And tons of teachers are concerned, and there's lots of chatter about ChatGPT technology and how that's going to impact English language arts going forward. So I decided to put together a synthesis paper for this for my students to tackle. And this particular writing workshop video is pretty special because it's comprised of a bunch of teachers from my National Writing Project course, put together the samples and the exemplars and the models that you're going to see. So this is unusual in the sense that you're not going to look at writing from my high school students. You're going to see my teacher students and what they produced as they Bob Ross their way through this particular essay. So without further ado, let's just jump right in, and you can see the prompt, and then we'll just stick to the status quo. We're going to pull the strings of my template. So we'll do the declarative and inverted thesis for the introductory paragraphs, and body paragraphs will go syllogistically. So there's a ton of examples in here so that hopefully we can demystify the process of how to write this particular essay for you and your students so that you can host a good, meaningful writing workshop. So this prompt came from one of my followers in my Facebook group, teaching teachers how to teach writing. And I decided to steal it verbatim for the most part. It's a pretty good prompt. So here it is. The advent of artificial intelligence programs such as ChatGPT have sparked change in how people conceive the future of educational instruction. While some commentators posit serious apprehensions as to the ways AI obscures the lines between what can be created by people versus what can be created by machines, others see new possibilities for human creativity in the changing landscape of artificial intelligence. Read the following sources and accompanying material carefully. Write a letter to your school board. So this is interesting. You're going to write a letter to your school board in which you express the role you think AI should have in the field of education. Synthesize material from at least 3 sources to advance your argument. So the teachers in my National Writing Project course tweaked this prompt for their individual purposes. So some teachers said in the field of ELA instruction, they really wanted to hone it down. Others kept it more broad to education. So for the purposes of this, we went with the broader prompt. So in terms of the sources, if you're interested in those, feel free to email me at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. I think we put together like 10 sources just so that teachers could pick and choose Lexile levels for their particular students and the scope and direction, the vision of where they wanted to go with this. So there's 10 in there, and you can, parcel it down to the ones that you want for your particular students, but happy to send that your way. So the question is this: how do I write the introduction? As always, you can declare or invert the thesis, and there's a caveat to this, right? So I always ask this question, and it's the basis of my second textbook. What if we taught composition like Bob Ross teaches painting? I think it's a pivotal question, because what we would do is have teachers positioning themselves as the expert writers in the classroom, getting right up to that easel and canvas and painting along with their students. So as I already alluded to, the samples you see here are written by teachers for the benefit of their students. So each student in my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind wrote 4 introductions for their students. So we had 17 teachers in that class. So 17 teachers writing 4 introductions. 2 were declarative and 2 were inverted. And that's how we demystify the writing process. So after you show students a few times how to do something, it really demystifies things and clearly delineates expectations and how to proceed through an introductory paragraph with a template. And that's another thing with Bob Ross. Very few people know that he used one heuristic. We call it a template in composition, and painting is called a heuristic. He used something known as the wet on wet technique. Every single time he did a natural landscape, he used the wet on wet technique. And for my students, they use two templates, one for the introductory paragraph, the declarative or the inverted, and then all body paragraphs, no matter the expository mode. So we're doing synthesis, but you can use these for lit analysis, rhetorical analysis, argument, persuasion, synthesis, research. It does not matter. These are transferable across the expository modes so that students can take a uniform approach. Same with landscape painting, no matter the landscape, wet on wet technique. So I've already alluded to this too, the Teach It Right 5-week mastermind. We're beginning another one January 8th, and we're going to meet 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for 5 consecutive weeks. We meet in Zoom. NWP, the National Writing Project, is giving 10 completion hours, so a badge of 10 hours for a 5-hour course, which is pretty cool for those needing PD hours. So at the end of my presentation here, I'll give you the link to my webpage, and you can explore and get more details if you want. But if you're interested in creating assignments like this with a group of other teachers and myself at the helm, this is a perfect course for you, and we'll do all my alternative grading methods, my templates, my Plato's Plato discussion, and you'll have a full access to a whole arsenal of really engaging content at the end of our 5 weeks together. So let's talk about how to declare and how to invert the thesis. So when you declare, just out of the gate, boom, drop the thesis as declaratively as possible. So you make some stance with regards to AI's presence in the classroom, the need for it, the lack of need for it, how antithetical it is, how beneficial it is. Some statement about AI's presence in the educational field. From there, it's just context and background. As always with my templates, each introductory paragraph my students ever write while they're using the template, while I have the scaffolds up, the training wheels on, is going to be 4 sentences long. And then there's some bit parts that go into this. So in the 5-week mastermind, teachers get a full immersion experience with my Word Study Academy and my Nuance Academy. And these are 2 academies that I run with my students pretty much the course of the academic year. So my students come to me with a vocabulary void. They just don't read as much as they used to. Most of them, in my 20+ year career, the vocabulary void is just becoming, more seismic year after year after year. So I, as the lead teacher, have a responsibility to kind of close that gap a little bit. So we do intensive word study, and what I want is an academic tone in this. And by tier 2 level vocabulary, I just mean your average run-of-the-mill SAT level caliber words. But we can't geek it all out, right? We can't be overly pedantic and contrived. Students have to teeter-totter balance the tier 2 with the colloquial and the vernacular. So you'll see the students try to do that. And then sentence constructs. I'm a big proponent of rule number 18 from Strunk and White's text called Write It Right. And in that text, in rule number 18, they espouse the idea that there's 12 different ways to construct a single sentence. So the teachers that are writing these samples have been fully immersed in that experience. So you should be able to see them manipulate their syntax for the purposes of achieving voice rhythm and flow. Ultimately, our younger, emerging, struggling students overuse independent clauses and short, simple declarative sentences. So the rhythm is like da 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 da. So we got to break that. And as I already said, exactly 4 sentences. Now you can flip that over and invert, which means you're going to start with the context and background, maybe a hook, maybe an analogy. As you funnel it down towards the 4th sentence, the 4th sentence is going to be the thesis statement. So same stuff, context, background, tier 2, sentence constructs. It's just the placement of the thesis goes last instead of first. So let's take a look at 4 examples that teachers in the NWP course wrote. So you got to address the school board. So you're writing a letter. So, you got to follow that format. And this is how teacher number 1 responded to the prompt. To the Ashbury Heights School Board, in making curricular decisions, one must first ask a fundamental question. What is the purpose of an education? So we're beginning with a rhetorical question. So clearly the thesis is going to come last, right? So this is inverted. Above and beyond ensuring the well-being and nurturance of its scholars, schools have a responsibility to prepare each student for the next stage of their life. Whether this be vocational, military, or academic, schools must help secondary students transition into the next phase as smoothly as possible. For these reasons, a strong focus on AI integration is a vital component to modern-day education. So let's reread that last sentence. Do you see how this is the thesis? This directly answers the prompt. For these reasons, a strong focus on AI integration is a vital component to modern-day education. So you also front-load the line of reasoning in an introduction. So we know that there's kind of a promise being made here that the focus is going to be preparedness for after what's next, post-graduation, post-high school graduation. What lies next for the scholar is going to be the focus in the body paragraph. So you begin to kind of lie down the line of reasoning a little bit without getting into the specifics. So no quoting, no paraphrasing. We don't want any of the sources in here, just a nuts and bolts, take a position, thesis statement. So that's an example of an inverted. Here's another inverted. Dear board members, the primary goal of education is to spark intellectual curiosity in each learner of every classroom. But the thing is, there's been a drastic dumbing down of education over the past decade. Not only are students not learning, the system is rigged to guarantee their stupefaction. Instead of integrating more AI into the curriculum, place the focus and funding on the aspects of the traditional paradigm that have worked for centuries. So you can see the thesis comes here, and again, you're front-loading the line of reasoning. Let's go back to the first. Look at the sentence complexity here. You got things like colons, you have dashes, parenthetical statements, really good voice rhythm and flow. And one of the things I emphasize in the Nuance Academy, especially in the introduction, you really don't want to be paralleling your sentences because that disturbs the rhythm and the flow. Unless you have an absolute purpose and a reason for paralleling, you tend to stay away from that. And again, look at the sentence variation here in the vocab. All right. So keep in mind this too, because I know some teachers have critiqued or criticized this in the past. They're like, my students could never write like this. Well, Bob Ross never dumbed it down either. And I learned to become a pretty good painter, by studying with Bob Ross. In the beginning, I could not paint like Bob Ross, but I could approximate it. I could get pretty close, and with practice, I'm able to do pretty much what Bob Ross is able to do at this stage of my career as a painter, right? And that's just how that goes. So students will grow and mature through modeling. That's one of the things that, positioning yourself as the expert in the classroom does. So let's see some declarative. Same thing, address the school board. So start in a letter format. To the Newport News School Board, if you attest to having the best interest of every pupil in your heart, then please invest in their future by investing heavily in artificial intelligence integration. So you can see there, that's the thesis. Now we just give context, background, focus on those sentence constructs, focus on the tier 2. Given that goal of a well-rounded education is to ensure the future success of each scholar, our district must put this at the center of our collective attention. To raise a citizenry prepared for the new world, the educational system must adapt and meet these needs. Don't just invest your dollars. Invest in our future and give the kids the AI integration that is very much needed. Right? So again, just nuts and bolts thesis. It doesn't matter. Thesis up top, thesis down bottom, sentence constructs, tier 2, context, background. Write it in the format of a letter. So here's another one. To whom it may concern, if you pour taxpayer dollars into extensive AI integration, you are willfully purchasing the dumbing down of America. And that is the thesis statement. AI does not only cheat students from their right to learn, but it creates students who are wholly incapable of individual thought. And I love the language here. We're trying to get students, especially at the AP level, to come out of the gate blazing, right? Just out of the gates on fire, so that the reader says, "Holy cow! If the kid can sustain this, they're going to get the sophistication point." And I like the strong language here. Not only do these AI measures open the floodgates to rampant cheating, but it breeds intellectual laziness. Clearly, this is antithetical to everything education stands for. And again, short, sweet, 4 sentences, no quoting, no paraphrasing, just front load the line of reasoning, thesis up top, thesis at bottom, context background, tier 2 sentence constructs. And that's how the template of the declarative and the inverted roll. And students can do that all day long. So typically in a writing workshop, I'll show students 2 of each, 2 declarative, 2 inverted, say, stop, on your mark, get set, go, do it. And really don't have any, too many questions after that. After students have seen it a few times, they're pretty clear on how to proceed. Clearly, early in the academic year, I do more modeling. And as we progress throughout the academic year, I do less and less. So my rule for my AP students is this. As of March 1st, I cease to be the Bob Ross of composition. I no longer model for them. They have to be independent. From September to March, they've seen me at the easel, at the canvas, modeling, writing with them. The templates are second nature come March. They become sort of habitual and instinctual. So they don't need me, which is good because I can't go to the exam with them. For my on-level classes, I might model a little bit after March, but most of the classes I teach have an exam linked to them because I'm in New York State and we have the Regents exam. We have college prep, so the university has an exam. So got to get them ready for that. So the next question is this: how do I write the body paragraphs? And my tacit response to that is proceed syllogistically. So for those of you that are new to me and have not seen the syllogistic method all that much, you can hop into my YouTube channel and do a deep dive into it. There's plenty of videos. For this, I'm just going to do a furtive drive-through, just give a cursory glance, and enough so that you can understand what we're going to do in the body paragraphs. But there's a big history to this. In basic terms, it comes from the Aristotelian tradition. Aristotle thunked it up when he was a teacher at the Lyceum, and the rich boys of town would go there to learn about polemics, oration, debate, wordsmithing, word wrangling, and they would throw out juicy essential questions like, what is justice? And you may have seen that in Plato's Republic, where the great philosophical think tankers would step to the proverbial mic and they drop their definition. And Aristotle observed, just like we do as composition, instructors, some are better than others. And he was curious, what separates the better from the weaker? And he got it. One day he had a eureka moment and he said, I got it. The really good orators argue syllogistically. And what he meant by that is that there's a cogent, mathematical, computative, sort of formulaic approach to their argument, where they go premise, conclusion. And when our students write, we want them to be this cogent. We call it bulletproof line of reasoning, right? Aristotle called it cogency. So if I were to say to you, premise 1, arsenic is deadly, followed it by premise 2, my dog ate arsenic, we naturally, logically, rationally conclude my dog is going to die. When students argue, they need to be this computative and methodic. And what happens often in synthesis, and we see it especially in rhetorical analysis and literary analysis in particular, students pretty much only present the second premise. And that's why in synthesis, for example, it sounds like the student is just regurgitating the sources. And on FRQ1 for the AP Lang exam, the College Board says over and over and over again, Your argument must be central. So to keep the centrality of the argument, we really got to focus on this first premise. So if we take that template of the syllogistic method and turn it into a template for the purposes of writing synthesis, this is how we go. And this is the same template for argument persuasion research as well. The first premise is going to be an argument containing a why reason. To keep the centrality of the argument, I have my students take 3 sentences to articulate this. So a why reason. So think about the introductions. We don't state why, we just state the thesis. Now we got to get into the whys. So that's going to be 3 sentences, and I'll model that for you a few times. The second premise is going to be textual support. And since we have sources, we're going to teeter-totter balance the quoting and the paraphrasing. We don't want to do one far more at the expense of the other. And then the conclusion of the syllogistic body paragraph. Again, I'm going to say that clearly. The conclusion of the syllogistic body paragraph. So body paragraphs need a conclusion as well. Are the links and the echoes back to the prompt and the thesis. So everything goes back to the prompt and the thesis in the end. All of this takes 10 to 12 sentences. That's the typical length of a syllogistic body paragraph. So let's take a look at one that a teacher in my NWP course wrote. So in terms of training wheels, one of the things we're going to model for students that struggle and are emerging writers is if you say reason why, you're going to drop a reason why. And it's just kind of a, backy in the corner, you got to do it. So look at how we put the training wheel on this one in particular. This is not an all or nothing proposition, right? So a little bit of a concession, but there are several reasons that should give one pause. So you said several reasons, so now you're going to give your reasons. First, the educational system needs to encourage individual thought and the cultivation of logic, the thinking skills necessary to be a fully functioning citizen. Second, it would not be wise to disincentivize learning in a setting whose primary goal is the learning of the individual. So let's stop here. Often with my students, I say, take a look at your first promise and put it into the language of a promise. What are you promising your reader in terms of delineating your line of reasoning? Well, this student, used the enumeration technique, first and second. So first, we got to talk about how education cultivates logic, thinking skills. So if AI is doing the thinking, then clearly we're not encouraging thinking skills. And the second kind of corresponds with that, right? AI disincentivizes learning in the terms of thinking equal learning. So now all the sources need to be tied to the first and the second. We're going to quote and paraphrase things that are germane to first and second. So beginning in the 4th sentence, the second premise begins, and I tell my students immediately get into the sources. So either paraphrase or quote. So let's see here. Take as a classic example the story of Sam Gussup, the MIT freshman who duped admissions. Early in his junior year of high school, Gussup learned that an AI device could effortlessly write each of his academic papers with the skill and alacrity of a veteran English professor, source C. So you got to quote, you got to paraphrase. There's a template within the template for quoting. I call it the 5-word rule. If a student places a minimum of 5 quotes in front of, 5 words in front of the quote and keeps the quote relatively small, it should sound conversational, bracket when needed, right? So that's what this student did here, 5-word rule, right? Drop the quote, keep it small. So you quote, you got to analyze it. From this point going forward, he never wrote an authentic paper on his own. He fed the teacher's stupid prompt into the browser and voila, out came a polished essay destined to wow any composition instructor. So quote from source C again. Not only did Gussup do this for his schoolwork, but he did it for all of his college admissions essays. So we're kind of in source C quite long. So we got to get out of this because we have to synthesize other things. So let's move on here. But the irony of the situation is this. The stupidity of individuals like Sam and Ian Withers, who then in turn boast of their cheating on social media only to get kicked out of their prospective schools. Withers, a kid who cheated himself into Harvard, arrogantly advertised his conquest in a YouTube video that went viral. Source E. One of his professors said it best. Clearly, Withers found a loophole in AI, but AI can't equip kids with basic common sense. Right? So this is all good. These kids like boasted about their cheating conquest, and they got kicked out of MIT and they got kicked out of Harvard. They didn't have common sense, right? Not to boast about it. So the conclusion, you go back to the thesis, you go back to the prompt. Funding extensive AI integration makes very little sense unless the goal is to discourage the learner from learning. Again, it sounds like the thesis. Go back to the prompt. To ensure the integrity of assignments and the virtue of the task at hand, the district needs to re-embrace more traditional practices. So one of the things that I'm going to talk to my students about, and the teachers in the NWP course are going to talk about with their students, is you begin with the district because it's in the prompt. You have to end with the district. Link it all back to the fact that you're writing a letter. You're addressing the district. The district needs to re-embrace more traditional practices. And that all took 10 to 12 sentences. So do the source materials link to the first and the second in the enumerated approach? Yes. That's perfect. So we quoted twice from C. We referenced E. We quoted from E. So that's good. Students need to draw from 3 sources. So we got 2 so far. So the question becomes this. Well, what do I do next, right? So for us, myself and the NWP teachers, we're going to do a 4-paragraph essay for this. Intro, 2 bodies, conclusion. That's all we're going to do. For this, just keep it a basic essay. So the question is this: what do I do next? Bust out another syllogism. So let's go back for a second. We're going to have an argument containing a why reason, 3 sentences, textual support, teeter-totter the quoting and the paraphrasing, links echo back to prompt and thesis, 10 to 12 sentences. So let's see what this writer did. This is a different teacher writing this one. So 3 sentences, first premise. If one were to juxtapose the scope and vision of education from the one-room schoolhouse of a century ago to the classroom of the 21st century, the differences would not be that drastic. And therein lies the problem. To prepare each learner for the real world, there needs to be a heavy AI presence as early as possible in the schooling of our children. Let's follow the same protocol. What's the promise? The promise is AI prepares kids for the real world, that the real world has a lot of AI. 4th sentence begins the second premise. Start quoting, start paraphrasing. Bradford Wilson, one of the world's foremost AI experts, cites the English classroom as one case in point. Over the decades, the subject is still heavily literature-centric, which does not match the literacies needed to thrive in today's economy. Source B. So we got this Wilson quote. We got to analyze it. The truth of the matter is this. Students are graduating from high school very well versed in the likes of Shakespeare and Dickinson, but are they literate in the technologies needed to be a contender in the global marketplace? This is where AI can help, right? So these nice transitions from one source to the next, have the sources be in conversation with each other. This is a perfect transition. This is where AI can help. Right? Anchor the thesis. Go back. Kim Smithers, like Wilson, do you see this? Connect. What does Smithers have to do with Wilson? What does Smithers and Wilson have to do with the promise of the first premise? So Kim, like Wilson, suggests that secondary educators need to go back to the drawing board and prepare themselves to teach their students the real science and math of the 21st century. Source D. Everything has evolved as the result of technological advancements, but it appears as if the educational system is still stuck in the days of antiquity. The graph in source E is a great case in point. At the 5 largest businesses in the United States, CEOs report that their employees who had a lot of AI integration with their schooling are the best and brightest prospects, as well as the most productive and reliable. All right, so now let's conclude. Echo that thesis. Get back to the prompt. Clearly, to bridge the education gap, one must invest in AI. To prepare students for what is next, which is the aim of an education, this is the one sure shot direction the district can go. So all the students, we're going to advise, just as a training wheel, to say district in the culminating 1 to 2 sentences that comprise the conclusion of each body paragraph. So go back to the prompt fully, go back to the thesis fully. So that takes 10 to 12 sentences as well. And that is how you do the body paragraphs. So this is cool. So, like 17 teachers and I made this. And, if you ever want to try your hand at this, take a look at some of the courses that I'm running through the National Writing Project. So we've teamed up. All of my professional development going forward is going to be under the umbrella of NWP, which is cool because they have the completion badges for those needing PD hours. And all of my course listings are on my website at www.teachinghowtowrite.com. So they're very affordable and not very time consuming either. So it's great PD. If you want the slides or have any questions, jot me a line at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. So as I said earlier, we can send the source packet off to you and these slides in case you want to host this writing workshop in your own classroom. So hope all is well. Be well. Happy teaching. Happy writing.